Give her to anyone. Anyone at all. She comes with a debt of £400 and a temper, and I will throw in the mare. The card room of the Ivelcombe was not a large room, and Bartholomew Marable had a voice that had been trained on farm dogs. Every table heard it. The two young men at the whist table nearest the fire laughed, because they were 4 glasses in and because the man across from them had just lost his 4th hand running and was talking to keep from weeping. Nicodemus, Duke of Ivelcombe, had come to the assembly for 1 hour to be seen, because his steward said he must be seen. He was standing by the window with a glass he had not drunk from. "Come, gentlemen," said Marable. "She is 24 and she can keep a house on nothing, I will say that for her. Take the debt and take the girl. Give her to anyone. And who is she?" Somebody called. "My brother's daughter, a Marable." And the Duke of Ivelcombe set down his glass and stood away from the window and said into a room that had been laughing a moment before, "Judith Marable." He would spend the better part of the year that followed finding out that he had said that name once before, in a fever, in a low farmhouse room, and that the man he had thanked for it and paid £300 had never gone within 20 feet of the water. Before the Duke of Ivelcombe had done, he would stand up in another room, a good deal fuller than this one, and say aloud what he had bought and what the buying of it had cost him. But that was later. What happened in the card room of the Ivelcombe was that 90 seconds of noise stopped. Marable got to his feet with the shine going off his face. "Your Grace, say it again." "I am sure I said nothing. You offered your brother's daughter to this room," said Nicodemus, "in the hearing of 11 men and 2 waiters. Say it again, and let us all be certain of what we heard." Marable did not say it again, and then the door at the side of the room opened, and she came in. She was in a brown pelisse that had been good 6 years earlier, and she was carrying her uncle's hat and stick, and she had plainly been waiting in the passage for an hour, as women wait in passages while men lose money. She stopped when she saw the room, looking at her. She did not colour and she did not retreat. "Uncle, the chaise is at the door and the horse has been standing an hour." "Miss Marable," said Nicodemus. She turned her head. He watched her take in the room, the cards, her uncle's face, and arrive at the truth of the matter in about the time it takes to read a short sentence. "Your Grace, you will have heard what was said. I heard the first part of it, through the door." Her voice was perfectly even. "I did not hear whether anyone accepted." The room went absolutely still. One of the young men at the whist table put down his glass very quietly. "No one accepted," said Nicodemus. "Then I shall take my uncle home, and we need none of us think of it again." She held out the hat. "Uncle." It was, Nicodemus thought afterwards, the best managed retreat he had ever watched, and it very nearly worked. It failed on the threshold, because Marable, being a man who could not leave a room without winning something, said loudly to the man nearest the door, "You see how she is. There is no gratitude in that house. I have kept the pair of them 9 years. The pair of them," Nicodemus repeated, "her and the boy. My brother's son, 12 years old, and a chest on him like a bellows in the winter." Judith Marable's hand tightened on the stick. Nicodemus saw it. He saw exactly the moment at which the whole business ceased to be a piece of drunken vulgarity and became a lever with a boy on the end of it. He followed them out into the yard, which he had no business to do, and stood at the wheel of the chaise in the cold while the ostler fetched the lamp. "Miss Marable, there is a magistrate in this town and I am on speaking terms with him. What was said in that room was said before witnesses. And what would he do, Your Grace? Rebuke him, bind him over perhaps. And then?" Nicodemus was silent. "And then my uncle would go home," she said, "and he is my brother's guardian until Kit is 21, which is 9 years next August. He holds the roof, the school money, the apothecary's account, and every letter that comes to that house. If I make him small in a public room, he will not strike me. He will simply say that the sea air at Ostend is cheaper than a doctor and put my brother on the packet, and there is no law in England to stop him." She settled the rug over her knees. "You are angry on my account. I am grateful. But you may be angry on Thursday and be gone by Saturday, and I shall still be at Marable Farm on Sunday, and so will Kit." The lamp came. Her face went gold and then dark again. "May I ask you a question, Your Grace?" "You may. How do you know my name?" Nicodemus opened his mouth and found, to his considerable surprise, that he could not answer her, because the truth was a book on a windowsill 5 winters ago, with a name written on the flyleaf in a slanting hand, and a voice reading aloud through a fever, and he had never in 5 years said a word about any of it to a living soul. "Good night, Miss Marrable," he said. The chaise went out under the arch. He stood in the yard until he could no longer hear it. By Monday it was in every parlour between the Ivel and the coast, and it had grown in the carrying, as such things do. Lady Corisande came to Ivelcombe on the Tuesday without being asked. She was his godmother, 79, and had been telling him unwelcome things since he was 4 days old. "You stood up," she said, "in a public card room and said a girl's name." "I did. Do you know what you have done to her?" "I stopped 11 men laughing." "You stopped 11 men laughing for 4 minutes, said Lady Corisande, "and you have given the county a girl to talk about until Whitsun. They are not saying that a duke defended her. They are saying that a duke knew her name. There is a difference, Nicodemus, and every woman in England can hear it, and no man ever can." She rapped the arm of her chair. "You have put her in a position. You will now get her out of it, and you will do it in a way that leaves her better than you found her, or I shall never sit at your table again. And how am I to do that? By making it true, or by making it finished. Nothing else answers." He wrote that afternoon, and on the Friday Judith Marrable came to Ivelcombe with her uncle, which he had not intended, and with a folded paper in her glove, which he had not expected. Bartholomew Marrable came in first, hat in hand, entirely transformed. He spoke for 11 minutes without stopping. He spoke of the honour done to his family, of his long guardianship undertaken at great personal cost, of the delicacy of the situation, of his own reluctance as a plain man to name a figure. "Then do not name one," said Nicodemus. "Your Grace, there is the £400. There is the proposal I put in my letter, which was addressed to your niece and not to you. 3 months' engagement. It may be broken at her word at any hour, and the breaking of it will be published as her act, so that not 1 syllable of blame can settle on her. 200 a year settled on her brother for his schooling and his health, paid by my steward directly to whoever teaches him and whoever physics him. Nothing to you." He let that sit. "Nothing whatever to you, Mr. Marrable, at any point, in any form, in perpetuity." Marrable's face went through several colours. "That is your Grace, with respect, a guardian has expenses. Then let him render them, and I shall have them examined. You will find, sir, that I have been a father to those 2. "Uncle," said Judith. She had not spoken since she came into the room. She unfolded the paper from her glove and laid it on the table, and turned it so that it faced Nicodemus. "I have written out the terms as I understand them, your Grace, and added 3. Nicodemus read. The first was thus: that the engagement was to be understood by both parties as a piece of business, entered into to repair a public injury, and that no obligation of any other kind existed on either side. The second was that 200 a year was not to be settled at all, but paid quarterly and terminable, so that it could never be argued that she had taken a portion or sold a claim. The third was written in a smaller hand at the foot of the sheet, as if added late, an afterthought. That during the 3 months Mr. Bartholomew Marrable shall be told nothing of my brother's whereabouts, his school, or his health, and shall receive no letter from either of us, and that if he applies for such information he shall be refused in writing by his Grace's steward, so that the refusal may be produced afterwards." Nicodemus read that one twice. "You have thought about this?" "I have thought about very little else since Saturday," said Judith. "You will observe that I have taken nothing. If I take nothing, there is nothing for anybody to say I was given." "Judith," said Marrable, "you will not be so foolish as to— You offered me to a card room," she said, without heat, without turning round. £400 and a mare. There is nothing you can now say to me in this house that I am obliged to hear." Then she opened her reticule, took out a folded banknote, and put it on the table in front of him. "That is the £10 you gave me in October for the housekeeping, which I did not spend because I sold my mother's garnets in November instead. It is yours. I find I would rather not have it." Marrable did not touch it. Nobody in the room looked at him. Nicodemus had seen men run through at Ivelcombe's dinner table by wits far crueller than this girl, and had never once seen it done so quietly or so completely. "Mr. Marrable," he said, "my steward will show you the stables. You are fond of horses." When the door shut, Judith Marrable sat down for the first time, and Nicodemus noticed that her hands were not quite steady, and that she put them in her lap where they could not be observed. "You need not have said the last part," he said. "No. That was for me." She looked up. "I am not a saint, your grace, and I have been keeping that £10 in a tea caddy for 4 months, waiting for a room to do it in." Something in his chest turned over. "Will you sign?" "I will." He gave her the pen. She wrote her name at the foot of her own paper, and he watched her do it, and it was there, the J looped twice, once high and once low, a slanting fast hand that ran downhill towards the end of the word. He had seen that name written in that hand before. He stood at the window afterwards with the paper in his fingers, long after the chaise had gone down the avenue, trying to account for a sensation he had no name for, the feeling of a door somewhere in the house standing open that he had believed shut for 5 years. And no way at all of finding which one. Kit Marrable came to Ivelcombe in the first week December, on his way to a school at Markford that had been chosen by his sister and approved by nobody else. He was 12, narrow as a rake handle, and he breathed with a small tight sound at the top of every breath, which was worse in the cold and worse again after stairs. He was also, Nicodemus discovered within an hour, the most interesting person he had entertained at Ivelcombe in 3 years. "How many acres, sir?" 11,000 and some. "Have you a map of it?" "I have 4. "Are they any good?" Nicodemus considered. "The oldest is a beautiful liar. The newest is accurate and hideous." "Then may I see the liar?" said Kit, "because I am making a map of the Ivel from Marrable's mill to the sea, and I have the river all wrong below the ford, and I have never been allowed to walk down and look." They spent 2 hours on the library floor with the 1740 estate map unrolled between them and a scuttle of coal on one corner to hold it flat. Twice the boy had to stop and sit back on his heels and wait for his chest to let him talk again, and both times he simply waited without apology, and then went on with the sentence exactly where he had left it, and Nicodemus, who had been raised to look away from such things, learned in an afternoon not to. "You need not slow down for me," Kit said once mildly. "It only takes as long as it takes." Judith stood in the doorway watching them. When Nicodemus looked up, she went away. He found her later in the cold gallery, walking the length of it with her arms folded. "You are angry," she said. "I am being careful, which looks the same and feels worse." She stopped at the window. "It was kind what you did with the map." "It was not kind. I enjoyed it. That is better. Keep to that." She trace. "Kit has had 9 years of men being kind to him for an afternoon. The schoolmaster who was going to make something of him and did not answer the second letter. The neighbour who was going to take him to the sea. My uncle at Christmas, once a year, with a shilling." She said it without bitterness, which made it worse. "So I would rather you did not begin anything you do not mean to finish in March. And if I mean to finish it, then say so in March," said Judith Marrable, "and not in December, when it is easy." He did not argue. He was aware, riding out the next morning in a hard frost, that he was in the ridiculous position of a man courting a woman he was already publicly engaged to, and that he had never in his life had to earn anything from anybody, and that he was making a poor beginning and enjoying it more than any winter he could remember. The thaw, such as it was, went on through December. She still did not soften, but she began to say things at dinner. She had a way of arriving at the end of an argument 3 sentences before anyone else, and then waiting there politely for the rest of the table to catch up, and Lady Corisande, who came for a week and stayed for 5, was heard to say that the girl had a head like a magistrate and manners a good deal better. The trouble came from the direction Nicodemus had not troubled to watch. His steward brought it to him on the 29th of December, apologetic, with a bundle of leases. "You asked me for anything in the office touching the name Marrable, your grace. There is this, a lease of Fens Holding, house, barn and 41 acres, granted 5 years ago last February, 21 years, at a rent of 1 shilling, your grace's own signature." Nicodemus took it. The recital read, in consideration of the said Bartholomew Marrable having at great hazard preserved the life of the said Duke at the ford of the river Ivel on the 19th day of February. He read it 3 times and could make nothing of it beyond the obvious. He remembered the ford in the sense that a man remembers a wall he has been thrown against. He remembered the flood water in his mouth. After that there was very little, a low room with a sloping ceiling, somebody's voice reading aloud, and 3 days of fever, and then Marrable at the foot of the bed in a black coat saying that it was nothing, that any man would have done it, that he had a family to keep. Was I ever told the particulars? There are none on the file, your grace. Only a memorandum of £300, paid in cash on the 23rd. Cash, said Nicodemus. It is not usual, the steward agreed. He put the lease in his desk. He meant to send for Marrable and have it out. He did not, because on the 2nd of January an attorney's clerk came up the avenue in the sleet with a letter, and after that there was no room in the house for anything else. The letter was from a Mr. Nye of Wexbridge, acting for Mr. Bartholomew Marrable, guardian. It set out, in the flat and courteous prose of the profession, that his client had been denied all information respecting his ward, that this could not be permitted, that his client had determined, in the exercise of his lawful authority and for the boy's health, to place him with a relation of his wife's at Ostend, where the air was mild and the charge moderate, and that the ward would accordingly be delivered up to his client, or to the bearer of his written order, at Marrable Farm, on the 1st of March. Nicodemus read it standing in the hall with his coat still on. Then he read the next paragraph, which was shorter. Mr. Marrable further instructs me to say that he is willing to discuss any alternative arrangement which his grace may think proper, and that he does not expect his grace to find the terms unreasonable. Down the passage he could hear a boy's voice, and the small tight sound at the top of every breath, explaining to Lady Corisande exactly where a river had been drawn wrong. The good weeks came in January, which is a cruel arrangement, because a man does not know he is in them until they are over. The map was finished on the 11th. Kit had it pinned out on the library table with the Ivel drawn from the mill to the sea in 3 inks, and the ford marked with a small careful cross, and he made Lady Corisande stand up and admire it, which she did for 11 minutes without once being kind about it, that being her way of paying a compliment. Afterwards the boy went up, and the fire burned down, and Judith stayed. You have never asked me, she said, why I did not write to anyone. In 9 years. There were people who would have taken us. I assume there were reasons. There was one reason, and it was cowardice, said Judith. If I had written, and he had found the letter, he would not have beaten me. He would have taken Kit to the coast for a fortnight in February to teach me. He said so once, at breakfast, in the same voice he used for the weather. She turned her glass on the arm of the chair, so I learned to be very quiet and very useful, and to keep the books so well that he could not do without me. And I have been ashamed of it for 9 years, and I am telling you because it is the worst thing about me, and I would rather you had it from me than from him. Nicodemus sat forward. When I was thrown at the Ivel ford, he said, I lay 3 days in a farmhouse in a fever, and I have never been able to remember anything of it but a voice reading, and I have never told a living soul that, because it sounds like a man inventing himself a sweetheart. I am telling you because it is the strangest thing about me. We may consider ourselves square. She laughed. It was the first time. They sat a long while after that without saying much. At one point her hand was on the arm of the chair a foot from his own, and he looked at it and did not move, and she saw him not move, and neither of them mentioned it. When she stood to go she said, from the door, in March I shall have to say something to you. I know it. I have not decided what, said Judith. I want you to know that I have not decided. It matters to me that it should still be mine to decide. He said that he understood. 19 days later he broke it. He did it in a lawyer's office at Wexbridge on the 2nd of February, in the sleet, with Mr. Nye at one elbow and Bartholomew Marrable at the other, and the 1st of March coming on like a tide. He signed an agreement, £2,000, and the lease of Fens Holding renewed for a further term of 40 years, against Marrable's resignation of the guardianship, his consent to the boy's schooling at Markford, and his silence. He read it through twice. He was not a stupid man. He saw the clause that Nye had put in near the bottom, that the resignation should take effect upon the solemnization of the marriage between his Grace and the said Judith Marrable, and he asked what it was for, and Nye said, smoothly, that his client required an assurance that the engagement was made in good faith, and Nicodemus, with 9 days to spare, and a boy coughing in a cold gallery, and a great deal of confidence in his own judgment, signed it. He did not tell her. He told himself he would tell her when it was done and the danger past. Bartholomew Marrable told the Ivelcombe on Thursday. He told it well. He had waited 3 months for it. He stood in the same card room and said that he had offered his niece to that company for £400 and a mare. And no gentleman present had thought her worth the trouble, and that he had since had 2,000 for her from a duke and a farm, and would any gentleman care to say now that he did not know the value of his own family? It reached Ivelcombe on the Saturday morning by way of a groom. Nicodemus found her in the cold gallery. She had already had it. He could see that she had had it from the way she was standing. Is it true? Yes. £2,000 and a farm. Yes. And a clause, said Judith, requiring the marriage. He said yes, a third time, and it came out of him like something being pulled. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said with terrible mildness, I asked you for one thing, not money. I asked that nothing should pass to him, so that no one could ever say I had been sold, and I put it in writing in my own hand, and you read it twice and told me I had thought about it. And you have paid him more for me in an office in the Sleet than he had the nerve to ask for in a card room in front of witnesses. He would have taken your brother to Ostend on the 1st of March. He would, she said, and I would have fought him, and I might have lost. That was mine to lose. Her voice did not rise once. And now I cannot end this in March, can I? If I say the word I said I might say, the resignation fails and Kit goes on the packet. So my word is worth nothing, and you took the worth out of it, and you did it kindly, which is the part I do not think I can forgive this week. Judith, do not follow me down the gallery, your Grace. There is nothing at the end of it but a window. She was gone from Ivelcombe by Monday, back to the farm, with her brother left at Markford under the schoolmaster's eye, and a letter of instruction to Nicodemus's steward that was 3 lines long and perfectly civil. What Nicodemus did not learn for 11 days. And then from a printed notice in the Wexbridge paper, over his breakfast, with nobody in the room to see his face, was that on the 9th of February Judith Marrable had gone alone into an attorney's office at the far end of that same town, and had petitioned to have her uncle removed from the guardianship of brother as a man unfit for it, and that a commission would sit at the Wexbridge town hall to examine the witnesses, in public, on the 24th. The town hall at Wexbridge held about 140 people on the 24th of February, and there were more than that. They stood along the walls and up the stairs, because the paper had printed the notice and the county had been chewing on the Marrables since November. Nicodemus came in at 9:30 and stood at the back by the door, in a plain coat, with his hat in his hand, and stayed there. He had promised himself 2 things on the road. He would not sit where she could see him. He would not speak, whatever was said, because everything he had done in this business by speaking had cost her something. She came in alone at 9:45, in the brown pelisse, carrying a deal box with a rope handle. Mr. Nye opened for the uncle and did it competently. His client was the ward's only near male relation, had maintained him 9 years at his own charge, proposed for him a mild climate and a moderate charge, and was opposed in this by a young woman of 24 who had no establishment, no income, and Mr. Nye regretted the necessity. A position in the county which had lately been much discussed. You are engaged to be married, Miss Marrable. I am. To the Duke of Ivelcombe. Yes. And upon that engagement, £2,000 and a lease of land passed to your uncle. They did. Then you come before this commission, said Nye, as a young woman who has been very well provided for. No, sir, said Judith Marrable. The room quieted. I have received nothing. There is no settlement upon me. I refused one in writing in November, and the paper is here, in my uncle's own presence, signed by 3 of us. My brother's schooling is paid by a steward directly to a schoolmaster and can be stopped tomorrow. She set both hands on the box. As to the £2,000, It was paid to my uncle by the Duke of Ivelcombe on the 2nd of February. I knew nothing of it until my uncle announced it in the card room of the Ivell Arms 2 days later. I think it was done out of fear for my brother, and I think it was done very wrongly, and I have told his grace so to his face, and I will say here what I said to him, that a man who buys a woman's freedom without asking her has not understood what she was keeping. Somebody at the back of the hall, a woman, said here and was shushed. Nicodemus stood very still as the wall and took it, which was the only useful thing he had done in a month. Then let us come to your fitness, said Nye. Let us, said Judith, and opened the box. There were 9 years in it, 9 household books, 1 to a year, in a slanting hand that ran downhill. She laid them out along the table like a hand of cards and went through them with the commissioner for an hour and 40 minutes, and the room, which had come to see a scandal, sat through it in a silence that grew heavier as it went. The apothecary's account for a winter cough, 12 entries, 7 of them refused by the Guardian as unnecessary. The Marchford schoolmaster's letter of the previous May unanswered. The coal and the year it was not bought. A note in the book for the year 18. My uncle says the sea air at Ostend would be cheaper. She read that one out in exactly the voice she read the coal in. Miss Marrable, said the commissioner, who kept these books? I did, sir. Since I was 15. Every entry? Every entry. Including the receipts. Including the receipts. He put on his glasses and drew one of the earlier volumes towards him, and turned it about, and frowned. Then I will ask you to explain an item, since it appears twice in your papers and once in Mr. Nye's. The lease of Fenn's holding, which my learned friend has put in to show his client's standing, recites that Mr. Marrable preserved the life of the Duke of Ivelcombe at the ford of the Ivell, on the 19th of February 5 years since. He tapped the page. And in your book for that year, under the 23rd I read, received of the Duke of I, £300 for the ford, paid into my uncle's own hand. Is that your writing? It is, sir. You were told what it was for? I was told it was for the ford, said Judith. Were you at home on the 19th of February that year? There was a small pause. Nicodemus, 40 feet away, felt the floor of the world move under him a fraction of an inch before he knew why. Yes, sir. And was your uncle at home? No, sir. He was at Wexbridge from the 17th until the morning of the 22nd. It is in the book, under travelling charges, because he was buying a mare. Mr. Nye rose very quickly and said something about relevance. The commissioner did not appear to hear him. Miss Marrable. Who took the gentleman out of the water? Judith Marrable looked at the book and not at the room. Our shepherd and myself, sir. He had come off below the crossing and the horse was down and there was a good deal of water. Hodge held the gate post and I went in on the rope, 'cause I am lighter and I can swim and he cannot. She said it the way she had said the coal. We got him up to the house on a hurdle. He was 3 days in a fever in my own room, because it is the only one that has a chimney that draws. He was frightened at night. I read to him, because it was the only thing that quieted him, and I was 16 and did not know what else to do. The hall had stopped making any sound at all. My uncle came home on the 22nd, she said, and on the 23rd a gentleman's man came to the door, and my uncle went out to him in the yard, and I was told to stay in the kitchen. And I entered £300 in the book, because that is what I was given to enter. She closed the volume gently. I have never known until this morning, sir, what it was that I wrote down. Duke of Ivelcombe came up the middle of the hall, and people got out of his way, and he asked the commissioner's leave to be examined. It was granted. He was sworn. He put a book on the table. It was a small book bound in calf, rubbed white at the corners, a country edition of a poet nobody reads any more, and he had carried it in his saddlebag or his desk for 5 years, and had never once been able to explain to himself why. I took this from a windowsill in a farmhouse on the 22nd of February in that year, he said. I was not in right mind, and I did not ask. There is a name written inside the cover. The commissioner opened it, read the flyleaf, and looked up over his glasses. I remember nothing of the water, said Nicodemus. I remember a sloping ceiling, and a voice reading, and being told that I would be warm presently. When I came to myself, I was told by Mr. Bartholomew Marrable that he had gone in after me at great hazard. I did not question it. It did not occur to me to question it, 'cause he was the master of the house and she was a girl of 16 carrying a jug, and I have been thinking since 10 o'clock this morning about what that says of me. He set his hand flat on the table. I gave that man £300 and 41 acres for a lie, and this month 2,000 more, and every penny of it was owed to somebody else. Then he turned round and faced the body of the hall and did the only thing he had come to Wexbridge intending to do. The person who went to the Ivel on the 19th of February and brought me out of it on a rope, said the Duke of Ivelcombe, is Judith Marrable of Marrable Farm in this county. I should like that said in this room at this hour, in front of all of you, because most of you heard her offered to a card room for £400 and a mare, and not one of you has heard this. It was afterwards reckoned that the noise went on for the better part of a minute. Mr. Nye asked leave to withdraw from the case and was granted it in a sentence from the Commissioner that he did not enjoy. The lease of Fens Holding, granted on a false recital, was surrendered before the end of the month. Bartholomew Marrable was removed from the guardianship of his ward as a person unfit, the finding Judith had asked for, in the words she had asked for, and he left the county in the spring and did not come back to it. But there was one thing more to be done in that hall, and Nicodemus did it before he could think better of it. He took the agreement of the 2nd of February out of his breast pocket and read the clause aloud, the one requiring the marriage, the one that had taken a young woman's word out of her own keeping and put it into his, and laid the paper on the Commissioner's table, and asked that his renunciation of the whole instrument be recorded. I signed that in an office, in the sleet, because I was frightened and in a hurry, and I did not trust her to fight for her own brother. She had asked me for one thing only, that nothing should pass to that man on her account. I heard her ask it. I read it in her own hand. And I did it anyway and called it protection, and it was not. It was the same act her uncle committed in the card room, done politely and at a better price. He looked at the room and not at her. The engagement stands or falls on the 28th of next month at her word and at nobody else's, and no consequence attaches to it. Her brother's schooling is charged upon my estate for 11 years and cannot be revoked by me or by my heirs. Then he sat down at the back of the hall again, and the Commissioner, who had been 40 years on circuit, took rather longer than he needed to arrange his papers. She came out into the marketplace at 4 o'clock with the deal box under her arm and 30 people waiting to shake her hand, which took some time, because she stopped for every one of them. Nicodemus waited by the horses until it was over. "You should not have burned your boats in there," she said at last. "I did not burn them. I gave you the oars." "That is a very fine sentence, Your Grace. Did you have it on the road since Tuesday?" "It shows," said Judith Marrable, and then in a rather different voice, "I am going to say something on the 28th of March, and I still have not decided what it is, and I want you to go home and let me not decide it in peace." He went home. On the 28th of March she came up the avenue at Ivelcombe on foot in the brown pelisse with mud to the ankle, having walked the 4 miles from the crossroads because it was a fine morning, and what she said at the door was nobody's business but theirs. And it took her a long time to say it, and Lady Corisande claimed afterwards to have heard the whole of it through a window, which was a lie. They were married at midsummer. He said her name at the altar in a voice that carried a good deal further than the service required, which Lady Corisande called vulgar and cried through. Kit came to Ivelcombe for the holidays and not for the winters, because the winters were hard on him and always would be, and there was no sense in pretending otherwise. So he wintered at Markford, where the schoolmaster kept a fire in his room by arrangement, and in time he was articled to a surveyor and made maps that were accurate and, in his sister's opinion, still hideous. And in the 2nd year, at the Ivel Ford, a stone bridge went up, 3 arches, a parapet you could sit on, and a plain cut inscription facing the water. Judith complained of the inscription for a fortnight. She said it was a bridge and not a monument, and that people would stop to read it and get in the way of the carts. The mason had already cut it. It said only her name and the date and the word crossing, and the Duchess of Ivelcombe was observed, once or twice in the years afterwards, to walk down and stand on it in the evening and read it when she thought there was nobody about.